All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar provided by Solarplaza, held in preparation for our upcoming the Solar Future Nigeria conference, which will be held on the 25th and 26th of April in Lagos, Nigeria. Today's webinar will focus on Nigeria's solar market and zoom in on the opportunities and challenges in an evolving landscape. For the event, we're partnering with a lot of strong partners on the ground. We are partnering with the Renewable Energy Association Nigeria, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Power for All, and RECP and Solar Power Europe to pull together an excellent program to cover both the on-grid and the off-grid segments. A little bit about ourselves. Solarplaza is an international business and development platform focused on the global solar PV market. We've been around since 2004 and have by now organized over 80 events in both established and emerging solar PV markets. Going back to the Solar Future Nigeria, I just kind of want to zoom in on this event where we will have pulled together 200 plus high-level executives to discuss the challenges and opportunities that lie in the immediate future for Nigeria's solar market. It will be the first dedicated solar PV conference in and on the Nigerian market, and we're really looking to make this a key platform to bring in all essential stakeholders. We're getting a lot of interest for this event, so I'm very excited that that we're working towards something very meaningful here. We will have one main conference track covering, as I said, both the on-grid and the off-grid segments. We will also have a tailored business and finance matchmaking session where we will have a matchmaking session that will connect projects with financiers and other key market participants. Now, moving on to the actual webinar, I would like to point out some practical things. If you have any questions or issues during the webinar, you can communicate with us by typing in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen where it says questions. Questions directed at our presenters will be collected, and we will all aim to get everything answered in our Q&A session at the end. And if you have a specific question for a specific presenter, please indicate their name, so it'll make it easier for us to direct the question to the right person. And yes, you will also receive the slides and the recording automatically via email after the webinar has ended. Now I will quickly introduce our three speakers of today. I'll leave it to them for a broader introduction. But these are the ones that will share their experiences and expert opinions on the Nigerian solar market. And what they see happening in the market. First, we'll have an introduction and an overview of what is happening in the solar sphere and space in Nigeria. We'll have Godwin, the Executive Secretary of the Renewable Energy Association Nigeria. This association is a platform for renewable energy practitioners and project developers in Nigeria to contribute towards the development of the industry. And then after this introduction, we will first have a spotlight on the large-scale solar sector by Erebor Okogun. He is the Managing Director and CEO of Enemowante, which is a project development and corporate advisory firm. And after that, we will also have a spotlight on the solar household systems and the mini-grid solar sector by Femi Adeyemo from Arnergy. He's the CEO and co-founder of Arnergy that design, manufacture, and commoditize rent-to-own rooftop solar energy solutions, providing affordable, reliable, and clean electricity. After that, we will have some time for Q&A, so make sure to write down any questions that you have. And without further delay, I would like to hand over the presentation to Godwin. Godwin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Evelyn.
Yes.
If the presentation can be put up. we can start.
You should see the presentation right now.
I'm experiencing a bit of delay. Cannot see it yet.
It should be there right now.
It's there now. Thank you very much, Evelyn. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Godwin, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. I'll be introducing you to sort of the macro trends that are happening in the solar market. That makes me very confident about the market and makes me very confident that it's a market that would give investors very positive returns. So like I said, we are an umbrella for all associations in the renewable energy sector, and we intend to promote the sector and promote good practices within the sector. This is our interim executive committee and our supporters. I just want to give you a bit of a background into Nigeria for those of you who do not know too much about the country. It's a country of 180 million people, a GDP of currently about $480 billion and projected to hit about 950 billion by 2030. And it's a country that is currently facing serious energy crisis. Close to 60 million people in the country rely on generators. And the Federal Ministry of Power, and that's basically mainly in the urban areas, those 60 million people. And the Federal Ministry of Power puts about 70 million people in the rural areas without access to electricity supply. The World Bank puts this figure at about 90 to 93 million people. And in order for them to reach the targets that they've set, they would need to electrify about 10 million households before 2020. That rural demand is currently estimated to be about 6 gigawatts. Now, this is just a brief introduction into the power sector in Nigeria as it stands currently. It's currently a very privatized sector, especially the generation and the distribution aspect have been privatized. The transmission aspect of the sector still remains within government control. There are 11 distribution companies and 7 generation companies, all privatized. There is a regulator and there is a bulk trader in place to provide guarantees for large purchases of electricity. Now, this gives you the key regulations that are in place for the sector, especially those regulations that apply to the renewable energy space. Now, if you look closely, you could see that the mini-grid sector, which I identify as regulation D there, there's a draft regulation that is supposed to be finalized before Q1 this year. And but the only issue that a lot of people, especially people within the Renewable Energy Association, have expressed issues with are the compatibility standards for distribution networks to allow them to integrate with the national grid. A lot of local players have complained that this may be expensive for them, but it presents an opportunity for international players. I give an example. A lot of telecommunications towers, a total of about 12,000 of them, are located in off-grid communities, and the telecommunications operators need to use expensive diesel generators in order to keep their operations afloat. Now, this just gives another overview of the energy situation that it currently stands. Currently, Nigeria has one of the lowest electrification rates per capita at 426 kilowatt hours per capita. The availability of power is actually very poor. Between 2013 and 2015, power availability averaged about 6.2 hours. About 25 to 30% of the installed capacity reaches the final consumer. And that installed capacity is put at 12 gigawatts, with 10.5 of that gigawatt capacity as gas-fired and 1.9 gigawatts of that as hydro. Now, this just gives you an insight into how expensive it is for most households and businesses to generate power. If you look at the diesel generation cost of about 98 naira per kilowatt hour, that is like an average of the levelized cost of electricity generation of diesel between $0.23 and $0.42 per kilowatt hour. And one of the major issues that has happened recently in Nigeria is that the federal government has removed subsidies that it was placing on petrol, and that has seen the price of petrol go up by almost 40 to 50% in the last year or so, in 2016 or so. So if you look at the amount of money that Nigerians spend on fueling generators, that is only going to increase as a result of the energy crisis that Nigeria is currently facing. Now, this gives you what households in Nigeria typically spend on both petrol and diesel generators, from the really small generators of 0.5 kilowatts, where an average household spends about $39 per month, to the really big 20 kilowatt generators, where the average household spend close to $1,000 per month. Solar currently does not make any contribution to the electricity generation mix, the on-grid electricity generation mix. But a survey by the German Development Corporation, GIZ, in Nigeria, of about 53 companies, identified a total of 115 megawatts of dispersed PV in combining standalone systems, rooftop projects, mini grids, that these companies have done. So currently the exploitation is about 115 megawatts. For a country that does not have a single on-grid solar project, that is really outstanding. Now, if you look at the global horizontal irradiation for Nigeria, you can see that large parts of the country have irradiation that is comparable to what you get in places like southern Spain, northern Africa, Australia, Latin America. Those kinds of irradiation has seen a lot of successful projects. And I highlighted Germany in this presentation because, you know, when I visited Germany, there were a lot of rooftop PV projects that a lot of households had, and I think that that can also be a very successful sector here in Nigeria. These are the key policies for renewable energy and the targets that the government has set for that, especially in the renewable, especially in rural electrification, where the government is looking to serve an additional domestic and non-domestic rural demand of about 6 gigawatts from 10 million households. So these are the key market segments that you can see in Nigeria, and you can see that since January 2015 alone, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, $50 million of solar PV modules were imported from China, which is our main supplier of solar PV modules. That includes both solar standalone systems, urban rooftop projects, mini grid projects, and there is no utility project at the moment, and that's what makes Nigeria a really attractive market. There's a huge energy demand, and that energy demand has not yet been met, and we're just looking for how to solve that energy demand by using solar PV. In 2016, Nigeria signed 14 PPAs for greenfield utility scale power generation IPPs with private investors who are looking to invest close to $2.5 billion to build about 1.2 gigawatts of solar PV farms in the country. And if you look at the off-grid sector, there's a ton of opportunities in the mobile pay-as-you-go systems and standalone systems. In December 2015, the Solar Nigeria program, a program that is funded by the DFID, estimated that there are over 130,000 standalone solar home systems, and that was in 2015. And in 2015, the same program launched another large-scale project where they electrified about 40,000 homes. So a lot more has gone into that sector, and a lot more is still going into that sector because of that demand. If you look at Pico Solar, about 300,000 households are using Pico Solar products according to the DFID in 2015, and I'm sure that that number is actually more because of the rising prices of household kerosene, like we will see later. Currently, there are about 6 projects that have been financed by the Nigerian Bank of Industry in terms of mini grids, and a study by Mentis identified that 14.3% of Nigeria's population could be electrified by mini grids. Another study by the GIZ identified that there are identified about over 20,000 sites for mini grid projects in Nigeria. Now, if you look at the telecommunication sector alone, there are over 12,000 off-grid towers and 10,000 towers connected to unreliable grid supply, and these towers could also be anchor clients for rural electrification. Nigeria has a very strong mobile culture. Currently, about 80% of the population is covered with because there are about 148 mobile lines. But if you look at the uniqueness of the mobile lines, there are about 70, over 70 million unique mobile lines, and this presents an opportunity both in the mobile pay-as-you-go system and for people who are looking to electrify mobile towers. But the off-grid sector is plagued with a lot of challenges, and not the least is the local currency's volatility. I mean, over the last 2 years, the local currency has lost close to 300% of its value. But we're still optimistic. The major reason was the fall in oil prices, but with the oil prices picking back up, it's going to get better. It's certainly not going to get worse than this. It's going to get better. There's going to be more stability as oil returns. And the government has taken steps to float the currency and remove certain exchange controls that prevented the currency's true value from being reflected. And this would have only a positive effect going forward. And also another problem with the off-grid sector is there's a long history of substandard products coming into the country, and people have generally looked at solar products and say that they don't work because of that, and it's going to be a hindrance to it's going to be quite difficult to bring them away from that, to show them that solar does work. And another problem is a strong generator use. It's a major problem. A lot of people have generators. I have 2 generators in my house plus solar panels to keep the lights on, and it's a lot of stress. Now, but the off-grid sector also has some positive signs that we can point to, and one of them is the DFID-sponsored Solar Nigeria Lagos Solar Project, where 172 secondary schools and 11 primary healthcare centers in mainly rural, very riverine, very peri-urban areas of Lagos State were electrified with systems that provided their entire energy need of between 5 kilowatts to 25 kilowatts. Nova Lumos recently raised about $90 million from OPIC to sell solar pay-as-you-go solar home systems in Nigeria. Then Nigeria's Bank of Industry recently announced that it has $3.1 million available through its off-grid solar energy fund for off-grid project developers. And the IFC also mentioned that about last year launched their Solar Nigeria program, where $40 million is available for rooftop solar projects between 100 kilowatts to 3 megawatts of power for SMEs, commercial and industrial sites. And I'm telling you that that money will not, it cannot scratch the surface of what is required. Also good news in the sector is that the federal government of Nigeria recently announced that there are 19 procurement openings for off-grid projects in the 2017 budget to a tune of about 2 billion naira, that's about $6 million. And those projects are basically for street lighting, solar pumps, solar irrigation systems, and projects in that area. Now, if you go to the on-grid sector, one very good news that is an upcoming event that is going to take place this year is to the tender opportunity that the Nigerian bulk electricity trader is soon going to announce. And it presents an opportunity for market entry for interested investors. Also, there's a growing demand from the urban sector for rooftop solar from schools, hospitals, petrol stations, private homes. And the main reason why the government is deciding to diversify the energy mix is because of gas supply shortages that have been happening recently because of some attacks on gas pipelines. You know, I mentioned that over 75% of the electricity generated in Nigeria is gas supplied, and when we have attacks on the gas pipeline, it reduces the amount of electricity that can be generated. So what are the challenges for the on-grid sector? The same liquidity challenges, foreign exchange challenges, the transmission infrastructure, local O&M skills, insecurity in remote areas. These are the major challenges for the on-grid sector. However, the government is working towards expanding the capacity, the transmission capacity. Recently, the government announced that the transmission capacity has increased from 5 gigawatts to 7.5 gigawatts, and by 2019, the government is targeting a 10 gigawatts wheeling capacity for the transmission grid. Also, there have been a lot of very prominent urban rooftop solar projects like solar power, petrol stations, homes, schools, hospitals. Recently, a member of the association informed me that he just completed a 40 kilowatt power project for a hospital in the north of Nigeria, Niger State. And those kinds of opportunities will make more people aware of the solar opportunities. In conclusion, I just want to repeat this quote that I got from JFK, which says that the Chinese use 2 brush strokes to write the word crisis. One brush stroke stands for danger, the other stands for opportunity. So in a crisis, let's be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunities. Many thanks.
Thanks, Godwin. That was a nice quote that you're leaving us with. Thanks for a very clear and extensive overview of both the on-grid and the off-grid market, which makes it very easy for me to quickly transfer to Erabor as our next presenter. Just for the audience, just remember to keep asking all your questions. We will make sure that they will be answered at the end of the session. All right, Erabor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks, Godwin, for giving such a fantastic overview of the sector. It makes it easy for me to speak about the journey and where we are, and use that as a context to speak about a very advanced project that is tapping into this opportunities So very quickly, I'll just start,
All right, Erabor, I think you might.
um,
Erabor, I think you
I
might need to
think you were
rejoin.
given a good.
Apologies, Erabor. I have to mute you for a little bit. Your connection is breaking up a little bit. Perhaps it will be possible for you to rejoin with your internet connection. In the meantime, I'm hoping that Femi, are you at the moment ready to give your presentation first while Erabor tries to work on his connection?
Yeah, please let me, I'll call you back. I'm going into a webinar now.
Femi?
Yes.
Yes. Can I hand over the presentation to you first?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Switching right now.
Okay. Am I on?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Femi Adeyemo, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Energy Solar Limited. And Energy stands for Alternative, Renewable, and we click the E to form Energy. This evening, I will be speaking on the off-grid decentralized solar in Nigeria,
Hold on.
the challenges and the opportunities ahead. And diving into that, I will be zeroing in on microgrids and rooftop solutions, both on the urban and the rural deployments. Just briefly about energy, Evelyn has done justice to that initially. So, we design and manufacture rooftop technology to provide affordable solar system for commercial, residential, and rural applications. So what's the problem? Godwin has done a fantastic job to reduce my job, really. So I won't spend too much time on this. Nigeria is a country of 180 million people. 96 million of that, it's about 60% thereabout, live in rural communities with bad grid, weak grid, or zero grid. And 84 million people are urban dwellers, but they barely get 4 hours of electricity a day. And there was a report recently by Dalbeck, and I think in collaboration with maybe the World Bank, that says that anyone or any community or any country, as a matter, that have less than 4 hours of electricity in a day can be regarded as being off-grid.
Femi, can I quickly interrupt you? Is it possible that you can click somewhere that says show your screen, because the audience is unable to view your screen?
Oh, okay. What of now?
Do you have... Hmm?
Can you see it now, Evelyn?
Nope, I cannot. Okay, I'm asking them. I'm trying one more time.
Okay, show my screen. How is it now?
Nope, unfortunately we can't.
Wow.
Okay, I think for the sake of the webinar,
Okay.
just continue where you left off. I think we
Okay.
will be distributing the slide. We will put in the slides.
Apologies for that. So, so like I said, 4 hours. I mean, that's what most Nigerians get of. Less than 4 hours of electricity every day. And why is this the case? The reason is we have average of 4,000 megawatts that's been distributed by the private distribution companies that we have in Nigeria. And it's no news that for Nigeria to be an industrialized nation, or for everyone to have uninterrupted power, we need 1,000 megawatts for 1 million people. So for 180 million people, that means we need 180,000 megawatts, but we have just 4,000. If we put that into perspective, Australia, for instance, has 1,800 watts per citizen. Okay, and in Britain, we have about 622 watts. But because we have 4,000 megawatts in Nigeria, that can only do 16 watts per citizen. And that's why they are, it's a must that there is load shedding, and that's why Nigerians have 3 hours of electricity supply every day. However, what Nigerians have been doing is to rely on diesel and petrol generators. Last year alone, 3.56 trillion naira, which is about 11.7 million USD, was spent on fuel. That's for residential and for corporate use.
Okay, Femi, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. I have now, I have your screen up, so I have your presentation that I will show. So you will just have to tell me when to click through the slides.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So you can just, so you're on the screen, you're on the page. So like I said, 11.7 million US dollar was spent last year, right? So that means Nigerians, even though there is no power from the grid, they've sort of resorted to fuel, and they're generating themselves. Okay. So we're talking of the opportunity because 60 million Nigerians have generator in their homes, right? So, and we have 96 million people in the rural communities that are relying on kerosene and lantern, and some of them on petrol now. So that creates huge opportunity. For project developers and investors. And on this screen you can see, these are some of the work we've done, and I can tell you we've not scratched the surface. Solar penetration in Nigeria now is less than 1%. So these are the opportunities in the residential rooftop, in lots of estates in the urban centers and in commercial centers across the country. So what I've done on this next slide is to kind of sort of put the data together. What are Nigerians spending at the moment running the more than 60 million generators that are in the country? So for a middle class Nigerian that has a 3 kVA generator at home, they're probably spending, it's minimum of about 15,000 naira thereabouts. That's the middle range. 65,000 naira every month, and on a yearly basis they're spending 73,000 naira. In 3 years they will spend 2.379 million naira. And at that cost of 3 years, I can tell you that if they deploy a solar solution, it is a lot cheaper for them because the payback period, for instance, that gold package, the 3 kVA, will cost them maybe about 1.5 million naira. So the payback period for someone running a 3 kVA generator now, which normally comes with about 1.2 to 2 kilowatts of solar, depending on the developer. Well, I mean, the payback period will be about 18 months to 24 months, thereabout. And you can see, I mean, the same thing for an Emerald and like a 10 kVA. 10 kVA is very popular among the corporate customers in cities like Lagos and Abuja. And what we've realized is, I mean, if they're using generator to power their business, yearly they'll be spending 2.3 million, upward of 2.3 million naira. And if they deploy solar today, even if they're paying outright, right, the cost will probably be around 5 million, which means in 24 months, they have, I mean, return on investment for deploying solar. So obviously, solar is a cheaper option for a lot of the customers. Next slide. So now looking at the policy landscape on off-grid solar in Nigeria. The previous slide. So as at today now, importing solar panel into Nigeria, I mean, attracts 0% duty. Right. However, I mean, we all know that solar, I mean, in a country like Nigeria, where there is still very little on-grid deployment, need batteries. As we speak today, there is 25% duty. That's 20% and plus another 5% for accumulators. I mean, those are lead acid, lithium-ion battery, and the like. However, the smart
20 minutes or so. What's the back?
However, the smart, I mean, developers could bundle solar and the batteries and call it a solar, maybe a solar power generator, which attracts lower import duty. So importing these components, it's very important to have certification or inspections done by SunCap, which is the certification agency for the Nigerian government. So they have partners, Intertech and Cotecna, spread across the world. So it's required that you have inspection and certification done by them. And in Nigeria today, for deployment less than 1 megawatt, and since we're talking of grid now, there is little incentive really. There is no feed-in tariff. There is no tax rebate, like what is comparable to other climes. So really there is no clear incentives. But like I do say, the incentive for Nigeria to switch to solar today is because they're relying on diesel and petrol generators, which is expensive, it's dirty, and it's injurious to their health. On the microgrid sector, this is Gordon talked a bit about the regulation on microgrid, which is still in the draft. So I just sort of just copy and paste it here. So for microgrid of late, I mean, just to mention that Energy has two commercial operational microgrids. So we're active in that space. Before our two microgrids went live, these regulations were not on. But to dive into the regulation, microgrids are now categorized into isolated and interconnected. Isolated, if it is less than 100 kilowatts, you might decide not to get a license. If it's 100 kilowatts and above, and less than 1 megawatt, you can decide to get a permit from NEC, which is the regulator. If it is interconnected, I mean, it's better. I mean, the regulator, they are advising that it's better to have a handshake with the distributed company, since they have the franchise of that area. I'll talk more on microgrid on the next slide, because I mean, for interconnected microgrids, the tariff has to be MITO That's the multi-year tariff order that the regulator used to calculate tariff. I mean, that has to be factored in for interconnected and, I mean, have a handshake with the DISCO. However, I mean, there has been a lot of discussion on the microgrid vis-a-vis, there's a school of thought is that the distribution grid and the construction has to be grid compliant. However, that has to, I mean, from an investment point of view, one has to look at, I mean, how cost effective that will be. If we need to, and how easy that is. If we need to deploy the microgrid, maybe on an island, how easy is it to build a grid compliant distribution grid using concrete infrastructures, right? And if you look at the multiple exchange rates too, I mean, that has sort of reduced, I mean, investors' appetite. We hope that the government will look into that sooner than later. On microgrid, most especially on the isolated one, it's a case of a willing buyer and a willing seller. I mean, we have, I mean, some microgrid deployment in Nigeria that users are paying upward of 150 naira per kilowatt hour, and they're happy because it's cheaper than the alternative. However, because they now pay for electricity, what we've seen is, I mean, most of them are very efficient with power, right? And we've seen that most governments, and not only Nigerian government, has preference for microgrids, not only because you could have more productive use, but kind of, I mean, make the government look good. I mean, saying the giant, I mean, solar plants. So, what are some of the prevailing issues on off-grid pay-as-you-go, solar home system and rooftop solar? Energy theft could be a problem. So any developers that is looking into that has to stay ahead of the game in terms of energy theft. I mean, we've developed a smart metering technology that that ensures that we are able to detect any theft, and we are able to guarantee, I mean, the kind of return and the kind of payback that we're looking at. And pay as you go, I mean, it has fixed payments as against kilowatt hour pricing that is obviously at the prevalent tariff for microgrid deployments. And I mean, in Nigeria today, we've had a lot of, I mean, deployments. We've discussed with policymakers, we've discussed with customers. It's still, I mean, in between energy as a service or a lease-to-own model. A larger percentage of customer prefers to just pay for the energy, most especially the corporate clients. They don't want to own the asset. They don't want to put it in their balance sheet. However, most residential customers prefer the lease-to-own. They want to own it over a period of time. Obviously, shorter-term investment for solar home system and rooftop compared to microgrid deployments. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, this is just the next slide. Okay, so what is the government doing? I mean, in Nigeria, I had a digest of Nigerian government budgets, and I mean, excess of 9 billion naira has been appropriated for off-grid solar related kind of installations in federal government colleges, some federal medical centers, and I mean, microgrids that will be managed by the Rail Electricity of Nigeria. About 3.35 billion naira has been appropriated for that, and we will see about 1.25 billion naira going into upgrade of solar manufacturing and assembly line that is sponsored by the government. About 2.5 billion naira will be spent on solar security and street light by the government. We hope that will work and will not continue to permit in that industry. Solar powered wall is about 1.85 billion naira, and Towards the end of last year, there was a groundbreaking event for, I think, 10 megawatts solar plants in the University of Ibadan. We understand that there will be a replication of that in Ahmadu Bello University's area and one in another university, another federal government university. So it's good that government is looking into that, and I think maybe there was maybe 20,000 units by government that was announced on solar home system. So we think the government of the day will probably do more on solar, and that will probably let them listen more and provide more enabling environments for the sector. So what do we expect government to do? I mean, we really want to see the adoption of solar to go higher in Nigeria. Maybe not up to, I mean, even if it's not up to the scale of what is happening in Europe, in Australia, and America, because the need is really here in Nigeria, we think government can do a lot to help trigger high scale of adoption. We hope to see a reduction in battery import duty, because even though, we're saying bundle as a solar power system, solar power has 25 years performance warranty. Batteries will die maybe after 5 years, so there will be need to replace battery. Because of that, there is a need to reduce the import duty on battery. There are batteries now that are, solar, RE battery and all that. So maybe the government can look into that and reduce the import duty on battery. It would be nice to have that at 0%. Also, it would be nice to have 0% sales tax, that's VAT on solar power products. We still pay about 5% now, as every other industry. Policies for solar rooftops on new homes. And there is no better time to have that other than now, when we have the triple minister, the same minister handling housing and power. So I see no reason why we can't have maybe 1 kilowatt minimum on every new home that the government is deploying. And when the government do that, there is a sort of ripple effect that will happen. And we believe again that the government of the day, we think they will have a listening here to make that happen. So we are looking at them providing more enabling environment to investors and developers. And we need to have clarity on tax holidays. Pioneer status, we think it should be more flexible. It doesn't have to be, companies that just incorporated maybe in the last 12 months or 24 months. Even if the company has incorporated in the last 3 to 5 years, if it's in the RE sector and it's a big player making a lot of impact, we think they should have that pioneer status extended to them. And we are hoping that the government will not compete with the private sector. What we need the government to do is to provide an environment with the private sector, not competing with the sector. So I've just put some pictures, just to capture that indeed there is huge opportunity, and energy is capturing some of those already. This is a 9 kilowatts peak for a residential customers that is powering 3 air conditioners and office equipment. And just to mention that, this was installed on the lease-to-own system. So, we've looked at, like the slide I showed earlier, that shows how much clients are spending on diesel. So we've been able to capture that and then offer customers avenue to be able to pay close to what they're paying at the moment on diesel. They can pay us on a monthly basis and they can have solar on their roof. And apart from these, we have several, this is a filling station. Godwin mentioned during his presentation that we have filling stations in Nigeria that are switching to solar. Because it's now a no-brainer for filling stations, and these are stations that Nigerians are running to buy diesel and petrol. The filling stations themselves are switching to solar. That shows the enormous opportunity, because the filling stations themselves have, what they're telling the customers invariably is, if you come to me, come here to buy petrol into your car, not into your generator. So we see solar replacing diesel and petrol generators in no time. All right, so that's fine. I think that will sort of round up my presentation. It's an enormous opportunity that we have in Nigeria, and we see that there will be massive collaboration, and that's part of why Energy has developed, the technologies, and it's there for Nigerians to now adopt. Those are some of our installations. It's a massive opportunity. Less than 1% of the market has been started. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Femi, for your very in-depth presentation and a clear overview of the off-grid market. Erabor, we will return to your presentation and we will see if it's possible to have you as a presenter again.
Okay, thanks, Evan. I'll switch to the phone. I don't know if it's better now.
It's perfect like this. Okay, I will just click through your slides then.
All right, next slide. Well, there's been a lot of talk about the challenges. There's some talk by Godwin, I think fantastic description of Nigeria, but I think it's important when you're looking at solar. I take this quote by Adler Stevenson as a jump-off point, which is we can chart our future clearly and wisely only when we know the path which is led to the present, and that's where I probably start off from. Next slide. Quick outline. I'll give a preamble of the context. I'll talk about the journey and why solar. Give a case study. Talk about the need for competence and commitment, and then talk about the energy journey and what the future looks like, and give a quick summary. Next slide. Like Godwin did say, we're the most populous country in Africa and the largest economy by the IMF. We have a population of about 160 million people, and the rule of thumb generally for a march towards industrialization is that you need 1,000 megawatts of generation and consumption per 1 million people. Now, if you look at, say, Brazil or South Africa, you can see that we are very far behind. South Africa, for instance, has 40,000 megawatts on grid for a population of 50 million. And what we've seen is that most of the investments that's available for power and most of the brains are focused almost exclusively on renewable energy. And therein lies the opportunity and the context that we are in Nigeria. Next slide, please. Now, again, another quote. We have a significant problem that was created over the past, say, 85 years. So we need new thinking, and that's where solar comes in. Next slide. Now, I've broken the generation journey over the past 85 years into a couple of phases. You started with the public sector phase, pre-colonial, pre-independence, where it was mostly hydro. That's when the first hydro plant on grid was built in Jos, in the mining district. And then later on, we had Kainji and Jeba, where the grid really is based on the base load, or the grid design is based on hydro, which is, of course, a renewable energy. The next phase was when there was significant interest in gas and more gas discoveries. And you had the AES badge, you had Egbin, which is about 1,000 megawatts, and about $5 billion was spent on the NIPP program from 2008. And you had the issuance of about 40 licenses for gas or thermal power plants.
Subsequently, in 2005, you have the EPSRA, which basically moved the sector from public ownership to privatization and created the environment, created regulator, created MBET, the bulk trader, and also created the environment for bankability. So you had a bit of a tension between budgeted power and privatized power, and then you had states like Lagos State starting captive power plants, and then obviously you had the landmark Azura project, which proved that investing in on-grid power plants post-privatization through international financing is possible, meaning that the documents, the PPAs, are bankable. In the last, say, 4 years, 3 years, you've seen a lot of issues around gas, mostly through the Niger Delta tension, which has been there for a long time, since 1957. And then you've had some debates about hydro, climate change. Most of our dams are built, the largest dam is built on international waters coming outside Nigeria. You have some discussion about building dams upstream on the River Niger. And then you have obviously the long time frame for building a hydropower plant. And I look at this at the next phase, which is an all solar or all renewable energy phase and all private investments, with obviously with a question mark. Next slide. So why solar? It's very competitive. We've seen significant reduction in EPC, which matches almost the same price for Azura, even less. We've seen the fact that solar is predictable, but our natural gas and crude is unpredictable, very volatile. And because most of our use or consumption is during the day when the sun shines, so it's superb for peak load. It's independent. We're not having to discuss with neighboring countries for tapping into solar. It's fast compared to gas or hydro, and also wind as well. We're a very highly densely populated country, and we need to have as much clean energy as possible as a legacy for the future generation. It's innovative. There's a trackers, thin film storage, as and more R&D going into solar, and we can leapfrog other countries and tap into the innovation in solar. Next slide, please. Now, I'll quickly talk about middle band solar 1. And now middle band solar 1 will probably be the largest sub-Saharan on-grid power plant. And it was founded by myself and another gentleman, and includes 4 parties, Nemuante, Green Continent, Alten Energy of Spain, and the IFC. Very quickly, we started working on this 5 years ago, and we brought in Alten of Spain as a core investor and industrial partner to provide some heavy lifting and obviously expertise. The license process started in September, and we got the generation license in December of 2015. We attracted IFC because we have the most competitive pricing and have a large mandate for market development. We started the PPA negotiation in 2014, dragged on for a bit, but this was after achieving connection approval, getting the land rights, getting NERC license, getting the EIA done, and obviously submitting the energy yield. It was important that we we benefited from the PCOA, which is the sovereign, essentially sovereign guarantee from the federal government. We initiated this in November 2015, and we're still sort of negotiating it. We signed a PPA last year, July, at the height of the Niger Delta crisis, when the government realized that it couldn't depend on gas, and also realized the need for energy mix and energy security. And the tariff was at 11.5 US cents. Before that, we were looking at 17.5, but we realized we had to take a haircut. We weren't too happy about that, but we believe the economics will work. We issued a development security as part of PPA requirements with MBET as a beneficiary of $2 million, because ours was a nameplate capacity of 100 megawatts. And subsequently, we feel that the PCOA needs to be signed very quickly. We're hoping that that the government can revert back to precedents in order to speed up financial close. We are working on the World Bank PRG, which we were nominated for, and we hope that we can sign up that this year, at least spring this year. Construction will take 15 months, and we can energize the grid every 5 to 10 megawatts. Just a quick nutshell, we're bringing in about 330,000 panels to our fund for the community. It's an industrial pack, so we believe that once the power is there, there'll be more industries, create jobs, improve the IGR of the state. We are on the Geregu line into federal government capital, which is the FCT, which gives energy security. And we are connected 2 kilometers into a brand new substation with superb stability and connection. We're in a location in Lokoja, which is very safe compared to where you have perhaps the best use in Nigeria in the northeast. So we do have some reduction in IRRs, but we feel that at least we'll get it built and get it built on time. We will power over 100,000 homes and connect over 500,000 people. Investments, for total investments, about $150 million. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, this just gives a snapshot of the sort of heavy lifting that we've had to do over the last 5 years. We're looking at a situation where there's going to be an evolution, but to tap into the opportunities in the sector, we've had to bring in international partners, international financiers almost very early on. And we've had to go through several key steps. Pre-feasibility, site acquisition, permitting, modeling, PCOA and PPA negotiations, which can take you 12 months, and then another 6 months for the financing and due diligence and negotiation and signing of EPC. And then we've sort of taken, or we feel we'll take another 6 to 12 months to achieve groundbreaking and achieve commercial operation, achieve the commercial operation date, obviously subject to sorting out the PCOA that we're currently negotiating. Now, what the slide just says is that the opportunity is there, but you can't take anything for granted. It's important that we go through this step to achieve standardized documentation. It's important we go through this step to get EPC comfortable, to get the banks comfortable, to get the regulator comfortable, to get the grid ready for solar. But once this hard work has been done, and it has been hard work, we'll see an evolution where we move from an unsolicited process to more of a tendering process. It's not clear when that will start. There's several projects we have in the pipeline, about 1,000 megawatts, which we are preparing for either a tender process or some sort of quasi-tender process. Next slide. What's the future? Well, right now you have 1.2 megawatts of solar on the grid, which is the Japanese government-funded project for a water power plant in Abuja. According to the policy Godwin mentioned, we're supposed to have 2,000 megawatts, thereabout, 2 to 4,000 by year 2020 and year 2030. I just compared that to South Africa, where they're looking at 8,400 megawatts of solar and some wind as well. We see a significant skills transfer and internalization of the value chain. Like I mentioned, the project Middleband is bringing over 300,000 panels in. There might be interest to manufacture those panels in Nigeria, some of those panels for over, say, 3 million panels. If you look at the 11 PPAs that were signed, we're seeing the creation of jobs, which is important for the country. And obviously, because of the fact that the gas is in the south, the solar will be in the north, that will create grid stability. Obviously, we know Nigeria has a lot of tension, geopolitical tension. Solar will create the jobs and create the power in some parts of the country, which will increase the level of peace and improve significantly the levels of poverty that we see. We'll see conservation of foreign exchange increasing in FDI. Like Godwin mentioned, you're seeing over $2 billion being attracted to the on-grid solar space. And so that would improve the investment conditions, the macro investment conditions for bringing in more solar investment to the country. And obviously the issue that we have with dollar convertibility, that should reduce as well. And you have improved environment. We're signing up to the COP21, where we're keen in Nigeria to be more environmentally friendly. And it's key for us because we have a lot of firewood cutting in the north. And if you put in more solar there, that means because electrons flow to the point of closest demand, you're going to see a lot of power into the communities where you have the solar power plants. And we see that we believe in Nigeria we can be like the way South Africa was, a powerhouse, a global powerhouse, where you see companies like Scatec moving their global headquarters from Europe into South Africa. We're seeing that a lot of top EPC and top project developers will also look at Nigeria and are looking at Nigeria and have invested, like Scatec, into projects in Nigeria. And we see also an enhancement of the value chain by the enactment of the NERC mini-grid, and government looking at the 40% equity it has in the discos to use that to drive sector liquidity and provide dollar priority for the sector. We already saw that by the CBN last month, where they said power companies will be prioritized for US dollar. So we're seeing an interesting trend in Nigeria, which will only be accentuated and accelerated once the first projects like ours get on the grid. Next slide. So in summary, sorry, this slide is a bit small. We're producing 4,500 megawatts, and we definitely need more power. Solar is fast, it's quick, it's clean. It's not the only power would need, but it will make a big difference. Only 40% is connected to the grid. And so the Ministry of Power is keen to get more power to the people. We've seen the act, so the regulation is there. The reforms are in place. We see new dynamics come into play with the signing of the PPAs. And since the past 3 years, we've seen privatization of the sector and an improvement in capital coming in. We've seen recently changes in TCN where the AFDB has brought in new management and brought in new funding to support and improve the grid. We've also seen the establishment of, like I said, good regulation for IPPs to come into the space and also for mini grids to take off. So essentially, renewable energy, can play an important role and will play an important role. It's not competing with gas. It's not competing with coal or hydro. It's symbiotic. It's key. It's quick. So we're seeing all stakeholders in the sector, local, international, really pushing hard to get the generation up and to put more solar onto the grid. So we think that we as the pioneers in this space are positive about the sector. We see more solar coming onto the grid, and we see more investments coming into the grid once the first advanced projects actually financially close, hopefully by June this year, and start construction by the dry season, October, November 2017. Next slide. So thanks a lot for your time. Thanks, Evelyn, for having me back on. And over to you, Evelyn.
And thank you, Eabor, for also another very clear and detailed contribution. So we are already quite over time. It's 5:15 at the moment. However, we will still continue with the Q&A session because we've got quite some very interesting questions coming in. But for those of you that need to drop off, the recordings will also contain the Q&A, so you will always be able to review them at a later stage. All right, Eabor, I will just immediately jump to a question that's directed to you. Are the PPAs difficult to handle with the volatile currency, and is it accounted for in the contract?
It is the PPA is indexed to the dollar. So anything is in dollar cents, even though Embed will pay in Naira, but it's indexed to the dollar. So it's you sort of mitigate the currency risk because of that. But when we signed the PPA, the dollar, the currency had just been floated, and there was a reduction in the external reserves. But we've seen that the CBN has been able to meet significant dollar demand. We've seen the CBN prioritizing the power sector. We've seen the reserves rising significantly. Obviously, it's good for us that the crude oil prices are also rising. So I think that the currency risk is diminishing by the month.
Well, that's a positive sound. When you look at your middle solar project, was that also the biggest hurdle to the success? And what is the single thing that helped to reach success?
No, I don't think that the currency issue was a big challenge. Locally, we had IFC. We had signed a JDA with IFC and had IFC supporting the project, and they've taken a big bet on Nigeria for decades, and they've been investing in Nigeria in different sectors over the past 20 years. The currency wasn't the issue. I think the greatest obstacle, I think, was getting the government to understand that solar is key to the energy mix. And it really took, unfortunately or fortunately, it really took the reduction in gas to the thermal power plant to have the PPA signed. So we had gone through rounds and rounds of negotiation, and then we had the issue in the Niger Delta, and then suddenly the government realized that they have about 2,000 megawatts of solar PPAs waiting to be signed. And so the key question was really at what tariff? and we were looking at the higher tariff, but we had a round of negotiations on the tariffs, and we sort of felt that 11.5 or 13 would have been a good tariff, but with reduction in EPC prices globally, and with good financing from IFC, we've seen decent IRRs to make the project bankable.
All right, clear. Thanks, Erebor. Femi, if we're looking at the lease-to-own systems, how are you able to mitigate and manage your risks, kind of bearing in mind that there is no credit rating system in Nigeria?
Good question. There is no credit rating system in Nigeria, but we are building house. We building that we call we nicknamed CANA. So that's predictive credit analytics. So we take all prospective customers through that, and we have set of data points that we're looking at. And if a customer is going to be a bad deal, the algorithm will flag it. We've been using that for the past 24 months, and I think the success rate is close to 90%. So that's what we use to reduce our risk on the leasing.
Okay. And you mentioned the SONCAP inspections. At what point in the importation process do they come in, given that poor quality PVs have been in fact sold and marketed in Nigeria?
Okay, good question. As a matter of fact, for any container that is coming into Nigeria, it has to be inspected at the factory. I mean, that's the rule. And the custom can actually seize any container that comes into Nigeria without a certification. So, I mean, one still wonders how those inferior panels get into the country. I mean, however, that's the process. I mean, if you have a container that needs to come into Nigeria, you need to get in touch with SONCAP appointed agents. I mentioned Intertech and Cotecna. We've had to work with both of them in different countries. Inspect the container and before the container is sealed. And it's based on that that you are then issued a product certificate, which is required for clearing at the ports in Nigeria.
Okay, thanks, Femi. Godwin, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the 2 billion naira off-grid financing plans by the government. For example, what are the timelines and the plans for the financing?
Hello. Evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That 2 billion naira that I mentioned, I said was basically restricted to just solar street lights, solar, and so just basically solar street lighting for rural electrification and things like that. But there are no clear timelines yet because the budget has not yet been passed. The 2017 budget is still under deliberation, and I'm sure that when that is done, that will be clearer at that point.
Okay. And another question that's come in is, how is the grid reinforcement for IPPs envisaged under the privatized market? Will this continue to be purely for the government to carry out, or will it be contracted as PPPs?
Well, the government hasn't really come out to make any clear indication, give any clear indication that the policy of them still being in control of the transmission sector is going to change anytime soon. So that the government will still be in charge of that for the near future. There have been discussions, maybe in the back office, about concession in some areas for private investors, but I think it's still, the government hasn't really given any discussion of any indication that they are going to change that shift in that policy anytime soon. So I guess it's fair to say that they will still be in control of that sector. But one thing that we should not forget is the government, especially this new Minister of Power, he is working very hard to reach those timelines, especially to hit the 2019 timeline of a grid capacity of 10 gigawatts. And that is what is giving a lot of private investors like Erabo who want to invest on the grid a lot of confidence.
Okay, and to which extent is RIAN working to ensure that information around opportunities in the solar sector is readily available? For example, regarding the 1 billion naira solar fund by the Bank of Industry?
Well, one of the things that we are doing at RIAN is that we are currently collating from all our members projects that they have done in the sector, projects that they have done, especially with the urban rooftop solar projects that they've done for homes, for petrol stations, because it's actually very difficult to access this data. So we are working, and we will be looking to work with any organization that is willing to partner with us to do a proper study of this opportunity. Because like I mentioned in my presentation, there's 115 megawatts, and that was projects, we can't even verify if those projects exist or not at this stage. The GIZ had a call for tenders, and 53 companies responded, and of those 53 companies mentioned that they had dispersed solar PV projects across the country, but we need to verify if those projects exist, if those projects are still working. There's no M&E, there's no M&E project ongoing for the sector. And RIAN will be looking with them to partner with any organization that is willing to get that kind of data, get solid data for the sector.
All right, good to hear. Femi, can you provide some clarity regarding the phrase distribution grid design and construction to be grid compliant? How exactly does this impact financing?
Okay. To build a grid, for instance, in rural communities, to build a distribution grid that is grid compliant, what the grid code or what the grid compliance means in that sense is the distribution poles has to be concrete, more or less. I mean, the same standard that the distribution company deploys. That will be more expensive in a rural community whereby you need to go on a boat to even access the rural village. Right, you probably need to maybe charter a ship, because those are heavy. You can't put it on just anyhow boats. So that's what I was referring to. That building grid compliant distribution grid could be very expensive, and obviously that cost has to be passed to the end user too. Right, so there has to be a check for any project developers go ahead to deploy that, a realistic check, as a matter of fact.
Okay, thanks. And while we're with you anyway, can you also provide some more color, some more details on the multi-year tariff order?
Is that for me?
Yes, it is.
Please, the question again, please.
You can provide some color on the multi-year tariff order.
Multi-year tariff order. Okay. So the multi-year tariff order, for instance, I mean, that is divided into, different sections. We have the R1, that's the residential 1, residential 2, commercial 1, commercial 2, and the industrial clients. So if we look at all these, the residential 1, those are the poor customers. I think they use maybe 4 kilowatts and above. And I think Gordon mentioned that in his presentation. So, and where I refer to that in my presentation is when you compare the tariff on the multi-year tariff order to the tariff for a microgrid that has to be cost reflective. I mean, there is huge difference in that. However, it's good to know that for deployments, existing microgrid deployments, consumers are happy to pay more, far higher than what the multi-year tariff order. For instance, the residential 2, I think the highest for residential is probably going to be around 35 naira per kilowatt hour, and that's probably in Kaduna Disco, right? The Ikeja Disco is around 27 naira per kilowatt hour for residential 2. However, you could have microgrid customers that are paying up to 150 naira per kilowatt hour. So the opportunity is huge, and since the microgrid, most especially the isolated, I mean, you don't have to go by the MITO tariff based on the regulation. So, I mean, that is something that could be looked at for any investor that is interested in the activities.
Okay, thanks, Femi. It seems that Erebor has gone offline. So this question was directed to him, but Godwin, I think you can. Oh,
Evelyn,
oh, you're still here. Perfect. Then
yeah,
Erebor.
I'm still here. Sorry, something happened to my internet thing, but I'm on the audio.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Erebor, question directed to you is, how do you address the issues of transmission losses along the line? Is the embed going to take the responsibility, and who pays for the losses?
That's a very interesting point that we negotiated on the PPA for a long time. But NERC, the regulator, decided to take an investment-friendly position. So there's a transmission loss factor, which applies for every generation plant, irrespective of whether it's solar, hydro, thermal. And one of the things that we were trying to get the government to do was to take out that transmission loss factor. And in the end, it's not included in the PPA. So we don't have that liability in our tariffs. Now, our power plant is 2 kilometers or thereabout to the transmission substation, and so it has almost a zero transmission loss, or has almost zero transmission losses. There's some solar power plants that have longer transmission lines, some 10 kilometers. I think I heard about one that's close to 30 kilometers, but that's not the norm. So the PPA does not factor in the transmission loss factor into the tariff, so we don't bear that loss. And to who bears the loss? It's because the solar is in a basket, is in the MITO basket, and if you look at the total power that's on the grid, or that will be on the grid, if the grid is strengthened and all the power plants are fired up, solar is not more than, say, 10 or 20%. So that goes into the basket of tariffs, and its loss factor is carried by all the producers and carried across the value chain. But for solar, for our power plant, it's zero. We have almost zero transmission losses on our generation and transmission.
All right, thanks. And there's a question I'm not quite sure. Maybe Femi or you can, or Godwin, if you feel like you have something to say on this one, please jump in. What IRR are you seeing in the microgrid space and in the commercial solar installation space via power purchase agreements?
Well, commercial solar, that's not what we're doing. But if I look at generally most of the solar PPAs projects have an IRR of between 14 and say 17. And I expect that commercial rooftops or commercial embedded or captive solar would also be in that sort of space. But I'll leave it to Femi to speak about that for mini grids and solar home systems.
Femi, do
Yes.
you have anything to add here?
Yeah, sure. So for mini grid, it could be between 10 to 14%, depending on, again, I mean, the grid design and the construction. If it's a grid compliant sort of distribution for the microgrid, 10% or maybe less. However, for commercial solar rooftop, I mean, it could be as high as 20%, or even more, between 20 and 5%.
Okay, is this kind of?
I would like to say that I completely agree with what Femi just mentioned, because of because of the increasing difference between the cost of running the generators. The petrol prices are at 145 naira at the moment, and diesel prices are going up to about close to 270 naira per liter. So yeah, that is very accurate.
Okay, and is this also the return that investors are seeking? Are they satisfied with these numbers?
I think that investors are happy with the IRRs that they've seen on the solar utility space.
Okay, perfect. I have a question for Femi. The companies that require large-scale electricity, they say that solar energy cannot help solve their power challenges. They cannot get enough power from solar batteries to power the industry. And how true is this? And what other options do they have?
I mean, Arabo is there, right? I mean, building, utility scale solar power plants. So, I mean, it's very untrue for any industry to say solar cannot provide the amount of power they need. The question is, I mean, do they have enough space? I mean, either be it, on the roof, or do they have enough space? I mean, it's about being innovative, right? I mean, if it's an industry that is maybe in the city, have they looked at how much roof space they have? I mean, maximize the roof space. If they have carport, carport. I've seen a 4 megawatt solar plant on carports. Right, so, I mean, it's about being innovative, guys. I mean, that's a myth. It's a myth that solar can power an industry. We've seen industry that, a lot of industry that has been powered. Not so many in Nigeria. A few are coming on online, and I'm sure more will be 2017. Batteries, I mean, when you're deploying huge solar plants, I mean, 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt, you don't want to use, disposable, cheap, 200 amp hour batteries. They are batteries that are designed for huge cycle, right? So that's the sort of batteries to go for, 2 volt, high ampere batteries. So with good designs, I mean, those are, we have a couple of such that we're designing at the moment now. We believe that some of them will come online before the end of the year.
All right. I'm going to summarize a few questions all in one, and Godwin, you will be the person who can answer this best. I think a lot of the attendees want to know how to how to join the association, what are the conditions to become a member, and also who is a good contact person within RIAN to discuss the solar opportunities in the country?
Forgetting that my mic is muted. Sorry about that. I'll answer the last question first. Who is a good contact person within RIAN to talk to? I am the executive secretary of the association, so you can always reach out to me. My email, I don't know if I can say this very slowly, is GE for General Electric, AIGBOKHAN @gmail.com. I think it's okay, Evelyn, if you could share my email with everyone. You can reach out to me. Joining the association is it's pretty easy. The association was formed in November 2016, and we already have close to 100 companies that have indicated interest to join. You'll be able to join the association by filling the membership form on the website, which should be up before the end of this week. So anyone can always join. There are 4 main categories of membership, and you will see the criteria for being a member for in each of those categories. There's the individual, there's the corporate, there is the student, and there's the associate member. And each category of membership has a different financial implication. So you have the annual fees as well as
Okay, I'm going to cut in there and and move on to a question for Erebor. I hope Godwin will come back online in the meantime. Erebor, has the MBET agreed to pay the net output generated by your project or the energy supplied?
Hello?
Say that again?
Hi, Erebor. Sorry, Godwin, we're moving on to Erebor because your line was breaking up. We'll get back to you in a bit. Erebor, has the MBAT agreed to pay the net output generated by your project or the energy supplied?
Yes, it has.
Okay, perfect. And then to which? Yeah.
I mean, it's what is there's a calculation for it in the PPA, and the PPA covers that.
All right, clear. And to which extent has your company considered energy storage in your project, as you know, to cover the nighttime uses, or maybe even sell in at night?
Well, not for this project. It's take or pay. That's the PPA that we have, and at the type that we have it, it will not make commercial sense to consider storage. And so it's a take or pay situation, and essentially what we've done is that we've oversized the power plant to ensure that we have maximum energy on the grid because in Nigeria you got 12 hours of generation time. So we feel that the PPA sufficiently rewards us for just energy generated immediately goes into the grid, and obviously because we are very close to a base load and also close to a load center, this is good for the grid and also good for the industrial customers that are nearby. Once it gets dark, we're very close to the Geregu power plant, which is over 700 megawatts. So that can definitely take up the slack during the day. In a few other projects that we're doing, there's one project that we're doing, we're working on now. It's a 340 megawatts solar power plant, which is right next to the Kainji and Jebba Dam. And so theoretically, the water acts as storage during the night. So we run more turbines water turbines at night, and in daytime we can go full blast with solar. A couple of universities and factories have come to us to look at doing solar with storage, and we're hoping to partner with people like Femi and others to look at those opportunities. But in our power plant, what we've done is to oversize it, and the PPA, the economics for it, just allows us only to sell what we generate.
All right, very clear. By now it's 45 minutes past our end time, and I'm really going to bring this webinar to an end, even though questions are still coming in. It just shows that what an amazingly interesting market the Nigerian market is, and we'll be having more webinars, so keep an eye on our announcements. So Godwin, Irabor, and Femi, thank you so much again for all your time and your insights. I think I can speak for everyone, saying if you want to meet these guys, come to the conference. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Evelyn, for having us. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Evelyn, for having us, and thank you, everyone. See you April.